Hello everyone! Sanctification is a new way to empower your gear in Diablo 4 coming in Season 11. And I decided to use the system 1000 times so that you guys don't have to. Basically what I wanted to know was, are there any weighting with this system and what are the odds of getting particular affixes or outcomes? But first, let's take a step back and look what Sanctification is in the game. Sanctification is a new system that allows you to take your completed item and basically gamble to see if you could empower it even more, or potentially brick the item. To gain access to this sanctification system, you have to do the seasonal quest line, but it will be at the very start of it, and then you interact with this Heavenly Forge. Clicking the Heavenly Forge opens up a interface where you can take an item and put it in this little box. It then states that Sanctification grants your item one random enchantment, and that is why I sanctified 1000 items to see what are these random enchantments and how frequently do they appear. By sanctifying these items, I will get the random effect and this item turn into indestructible. Indestructible essentially just means that it ignores durability loss, which is kind of weird on items like rings that don't normally have it. You can also get new powerful affixes, such as this new one stating that gem strength in this item is increased by 200%. The item can also replace one of the existing affixes with a new one, which could be powerful in some cases, or just straight up make the item worse. But one of the most powerful outcomes of this system is getting an additional aspect on your item, which could enable crazy variations of certain builds. You can also get another GA roll on your item, going from 1 to 2. Engaging with this system costs Heavenly Sigils, is a new seasonal currency, and we are not entirely certain where this drops, from what activities, and at what rate. But now when you know how the system works, let's look at the data I collected. Macrobioboy also did this, and he made an excellent video about this. Yeah, I will link it in the description below. The distribution between the different outcomes seems to be roughly what we see in the graph here on the left. Do note that although I've done this 1000 times, I had to remove all the weapons because the weapons are apparently bugged. On top of that, even though I have 724 points of data in this sample size, it's statistically too small to draw any definitive conclusions. We can only see some tendencies with this data. Based on the data collected, we can assume that indestructible aspects in GA are going to be around 20% chance to occur. We can also see that replacing an affix seems to be triggering about 10% of the time when you're slamming. And we can also see that adding an additional affix happens roughly 30% of the time. These rates are not set in stone because we simply don't have enough data yet, but it's a pretty solid indication that it's roughly these rates anyway. Do note that there seems to be something going on with offensive aspects. I barely got any offensive aspects at all on any slots. I basically had Artful Initiative once on my gloves, and I had some other miscellaneous ones. So do note that this list is not a complete list. I will link this spreadsheet with all of the data in the description below so that you can take a look at this yourselves. Although this sample size is small, we had 111 pair of gloves in this dataset. In this dataset, we could see that aspects happened 19.82% of the times, and replacing an affix happened 8.11% of the times. We also saw indestructible at 18.92% of the times, and GA at 18.92% as well. But there are some kind of powerful options here for affixes that are noteworthy. For example, we have 2 to 3 core skills, for instance, which is incredibly powerful, and it happened 2 times in this dataset. Apart from the core ranks, we also had powerful multipliers to poison, physical, shadow, and cold damage. This happened 1 time each, so it's also pretty rare. There are some affixes that didn't quite seem to follow the affix rules that you normally have. So for instance, if we look at boots, we could see that boots had cooldown reduction being one of the options for it. This makes certain builds easier to achieve, such as the death trap build, where you can get cooldown on more slots than you would normally get access to. But it would be difficult to get these, as it's a very low chance. It's a sub 1% chance in this dataset. We also have crit chance as an option for boots, which is also kind of wild. So there are some stats here that are very interesting in terms of build making. But one surprise that I just stumbled upon as well is the ranks to all skills. This is basically a mini Shaco that ends up being at most 2 ranks to all skills on that item, because once you have sanctified an item, you can't go back to the blacksmith and try to reroll the GAs. It's finalized. You can't make any changes to that item anymore, including changing the aspect. Do note though that weapons seems to be bugged right now on the PTR, because we didn't see a single aspect outcome over 250 plus weapon rolls. We would just have to assume it's bugged or that it's intentional. We don't know which, right? But at least that's not happening on the PTR right now. One important note about the different outcomes is that aspects in general can only have the aspect type that is normally accessible on the item. For instance, on my rings, I can't get a defensive aspect and I can't get an offensive aspect on my pants. This is important because basically that limits the top end of which aspect you can get per each slot. So if you get some cool utility aspect on your pants, you shouldn't be sad that you didn't get a offensive aspect. The main takeaway from all of this data is that the truly negative outcome where you've reduced the power on your item comes from the replacement, and it only happens about 10% of the time, which means 9 out of 10 times you might get a weak option, such as indestructible or a damage multiplier to the wrong damage type or something similar, but you're only reducing the power on your item when you get a replacement that replaces an affix on your item that you actually do need. In every other circumstance, slamming or sanctifying an item is going to give you some sort of positive outcome. I understand that for hardcore players, the indestructible option is basically you getting nothing, but at least it's not reducing the relative power on your item. Everyone will interact with the system differently. I know I will slam basically every 1 GA item that happens to have the correct GA already, but the potential upswing of some of these items is going to be insane, especially if offensive items like weapons can actually have another offensive aspect on them. I have definitely not seen all of the available aspects yet. Some of these aspects I've only seen one time when I was collecting this data, so I'm sure there are more aspects that can roll, especially the offensive ones. But yeah, this was 1000 data points of sanctification and just seeing what sort of outcomes we had. I hope this video was helpful in terms of just trying to demystifying this whole new system and putting some of you at ease. I understand there is a part of the community that will be disappointed that Indestructible is happening this many times and that we are replacing this frequently, but let's play with the system for a while and see how it evolves. If you have any feedback or thoughts about this system, please drop them in the comment section below. I think this system still has some quirks to figure out, but I think this is a good path for Diablo 4 going forward. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.